Welcome. My name's Winnie and I'll be chairing for this session. I'm here to introduce Charelle Collett. Charelle is a technical writer for Red Hat and full stack devourer. She is passionate about good design, information security and getting involved with the tech community. We're not hanging upside down from a pole. She can be found working towards her Bachelor of IT, volunteering at a conference or studying Japanese. Konnichiwa. So please give a warm welcome to Charelle. And I'll leave you to it.
All right. Sorry, that was my fault. All right. So earlier in the year, I went to Canberra for a conference, B-Sides. It's a security one. And it was my first time to Canberra, so I thought, OK, I'm going to visit the Red Hat office there. So flew down, found the building. It's really cool. They're on like the top floor, and you go up, and there's the giant glass windows. And you can see like the lake with the fountain that comes on at the set time, and you can see like Parliament House and stuff. It's really cool. And since we're so high up, there are like birds that go up and down. It's really cool. So like any good tourist, I took a lot of pictures. But there's one particular picture that I want to show you guys, and it's that one. It's a door with documentation. Yeah, right? I thought so too. So we've all done this, right? Go to a door and you push. Oh no, you have to pull. Or you pull. Oh, you have to push. Or in the awful cases where you do both and then it turns out you have to slide, right? So what if I tell you this isn't your fault? You don't have to feel stupid for doing this. And it's because maybe it's not because you didn't read the documentation. It's because the door might be badly designed. So what is design? When you hear the word design, you think about, pretty UX and nice interfaces and stuff. But design doesn't just relate to physical items or products or anything. Anything, processes, instructions, even like organizational structure, they all had to be designed. So that makes pretty much everyone who creates anything a designer, right? Congratulations, you're all designers now. So why is this important? Now that, with your new status, how does it affect you? Turns out design is really important because here's something that I've done, I know, and I'm sure a lot of people here. You go try use something, like a new piece of software, cool thing you hear about, try use it, it's too hard to use, I'm just going to use something else, right? So if you make something that's difficult to use, that's frustrating, if it's confusing, people are just going to go elsewhere, right? They're not going to use the thing that you're making. Another reason, two more reasons, security. So bad design is related to a lot of security problems. And not just security, but safety. Bad design is also can also be a safety issue in a lot of cases. And so I'm going to bring a couple of examples. So for security, let's talk about passwords. No one likes passwords, no one at all. So if you make really complex, difficult rules to remember numbers and symbols and all that, people are just going to write it down and stick it on their monitor or post it, right? So this is an example of something that's like really hard to use, badly designed, that people are just going to work around it. So people working around things, right? If you've got a door that automatically locks behind you and someone needs to go through it all the time to do their job, they're just going to prop it open with a box, So much for that security feature. This thing, the mouse jiggle, it's amazing. I just found out it exists. So you can get them for nothing on Amazon. You plug it in, and every so often it just moves your mouse a little bit to prevent the screen locking. Why does this exist, right? All right, so on to safety. 3 Mile Island, who's heard of this? Yeah, okay. It was a partial nuclear meltdown thing. It affected a lot of people. People were evacuated. They had to like cover up crops and all sorts of crazy things. Yeah, and so it led to the immediate shutdown of a bunch of nuclear power plants, and it really significantly slowed down the industry for a long time. And of course, like any of these like big disaster type things, it was a bunch of cascading problems. But one of the reasons, so there was like stuck valves and things, but one of the reasons was some gauges or indicators were misread. And if you look at that control panel, look how easy it is and intuitive to use, right? So they were like, oh, okay, human error. So they were like, the operators didn't know what to do, they did the wrong thing, or whatever the wrong thing was. So they attributed, partially attributed this to human error. So I want to talk about human error. Human error is just blaming the user, right? It's, maybe blaming is a strong word, but it is. So you're saying that like when something goes wrong in a system, then the user's often blamed for doing the wrong thing rather than the system for doing the wrong thing, right? So it's, yeah, attributing something to human error is just saying that like the user was wrong. But the thing is, people are all different. We all make mistakes, people make mistakes, so you can't rely on everyone always doing everything right by the book all the time, right? So people do really weird things. So, firstly, you can't always rely on people reading the documentation because when was the last time you read the manual to your microwave, right? Secondly, you can't always rely on them interpreting it in the way that you meant, right? So human error, this is what we blame this on. All right, so how do we fix this? Or, yeah, what's the solution? It's to think about the people first. Think about what people do and how they behave and interact. And if you go in with that mindset, then you don't have people fighting your system. They work together with it, or because you're working with their behavior. Yeah. So rather than saying, you should do this, just, yeah, work with them. So I'm going to go through some design principles to help you do this, because it's all well and good to say, you should do this, but how, okay? So we've got some design principles up here that I want to go through and talk through. First one is visibility. This one's pretty self-explanatory. So you should be able to see really clearly what you can do or what's available. Because if features are hidden beneath like 50 submenus, people aren't going to find them, people aren't going to use them. In the same way, if your UI is super cluttered, who knows what's going on, all right? So that one's really simple. The next one is feedback. So feedback is you have to tell people what happened or what is happening. How do they know that what they've done has actually affected the system in any way? So, and it also should be immediate. Like if there's a delay, then it's less easy to attribute that feedback to what you just did. So a good example is pedestrian buttons, because I see it a lot. You go, press, I don't know if it's been pressed, let's mash it a few more times. Next person comes along, they're like, oh, I need to mash this a few times as well. Or the opposite, where like there's a giant group standing there, and then the lights go through a whole cycle and no one's pressed the button. So, but these lights, I'm not sure if you can see it well here, but I see you have them in Melbourne, and they're great. You press it, and then this little red light comes up, and you know that it's been pressed. How good is that? We should all move into that feature. I don't see them around Brisbane. Okay, so bringing this more to a more relatable topic, something a bit closer to home, is error messages. Yeah. Oh, shit. That one. So make your error messages useful, please. If something happens and I see error 35, what does that mean, right? So make them useful. And how are you going to make them useful? I have 3 easy tips. So you want to say what happened, what went wrong. Include the name of your application, because obviously we don't all run just one thing at a time. So I see this error message come up and I'm like, oh, what's this relating to? So include the name of your application. Secondly, tell me why it happened, what went wrong, and impact if you can, if that's relevant. And in this one, I want to say avoid blaming words. So if you see illegal operation, that's really scary. So wrong and bad and words like that is just blaming people. It makes people feel bad. You don't want people to feel bad when they're using your software, right? And lastly, how do you fix it? This is the most important one, because it's one thing to see error 35, but then what do I do? Yeah, I don't know. Also, see the system administrator, not useful advice, because you see this at home and you go, well, that's me. Now what? So a couple more tips. Different messages. Generic messages are equally unhelpful. If you just see like a frowny face and then something went wrong, that's not useful. Be very specific. For each case it can fail, then put a specific message, please. Simple sentences. We're already panicking because something went wrong. We don't have to parse like it's a giant essay. Correct tense. So that can indicate whether the problem is still happening or if it's something that has happened and not ongoing. So just be wary of that in your language. And color coding. So I see often people go red, like, okay, web forms. If you submit and then something's wrong or didn't validate properly, it'll turn red. But red, green colorblindness is the most common kind. So you're alienating all these people. They don't know that something's gone wrong. So don't rely on, like, sure, have color, but don't have it as the only indicator. Yeah? Have I gone through everything? Yes. All right, so here's a better example. So you've got up here, what went wrong? You can read, your memory might exceed. Oh no. Why did it go wrong? Because you set it to this crazy number of 9s when you only have 100,000 bytes. So how do you fix it? Just change these values in here and here. And there you go. Like, it's a more relaxing experience, or more useful experience, rather, than seeing just error 39 or whatever number of the day. All right. So on to the next one, constraints. This one is, telling users what they can and can't do. Because people will try to do things that you didn't expect. So this came up as a docs bug. This resolution that we came up with was just stick this note in the docs. But it kind of shows that people, these images are meant to be used by Nova. People are trying to use it with Glance. But this wasn't clear. This obviously wasn't clear to the user, so they raised it as a, hey, can you include in the documentation that you can't do this? When realistically, they should be able to figure that out, right? A really good example is this. You can absolutely tell that you cannot undo and redo right now, but you can cut, copy, and paste. Like, no extra reading, no extra, it's just really obvious, nice and simple, and you can't even tell that someone put thought into this, but it's almost, invisible. You can't tell that design was intentional and stuff, so that's nice. All right, next one is mapping. All right, this one is how a control relates to what it affects. So a really good example, like the classic example, I guess, is these stoves. For the left one, you can't tell which ones they relate to unless you read the little labels or the little pictures underneath, right? And most stoves are like that. But with the right one, you can absolutely tell which knob relates to which stovetop, right? So that's another simple way that just the layout can convey this information to your user. And you can use labels, positioning, a few different techniques. So Bear in mind, if you have controls and if you have the thing that controls, how are you telling them like that these things are telling people that these things are related? The next one is consistency. So in an ideal world, you want to keep things simple, right? Because simple things are easy to use. But in like our giant complex systems of today, then it's not always possible. But what you can do is use standards, be consistent in your patterns, icons, things like that, in your behaviors. If it does something in a certain way, repeat that way for another, like if you have to do it again or whatever. So for example, these icons, you all know probably what all of these mean because you've seen them everywhere. They're consistent. So that's one less thing for you to learn when you're like interacting with a new thing. If you can use that knowledge that the users have already, then yeah, that's making it easier for them. Yeah, so for example, some examples are like switching from Photoshop to GIMP. You have to like learn all this new stuff, and it's kind of a pain, and so people complain about that. Or switching to even like new Linux desktop or something. If they've been using Windows their whole life, then it's kind of hard to switch over because I have to learn all this new stuff. So yeah, just reuse what people already know. Yes. The last one is affordance, the last one I have today. And this is how the user can tell how to interact with a thing, right? So it's also called discoverability. So an example here is that link. You can easily tell what you can do with it. You can click it because it's blue and it's underlined and all that. But this is the reason why I don't like video game tutorials. And I'll explain. Because they are telling you what to do. You go into a game, you just want to play, but first you have to read through, oh, this is how you do this. All right, go to the next thing. Okay, now I'm telling you how to do this. And in the end, it feels a lot like this guy. Hey, do you know you can do this? A game that, on the flip side, a game that does this absolutely beautifully and I'm in love with is Portal. So if you haven't played it, there's not a tutorial or anything. You just can tell what you can do and what you can't do. Just by the design of the levels, you can see, oh, the texture's here, or this thing is kind of weird. And it just kind of teaches you how to use it. It's just really beautiful. I love it. Yeah, so the way the puzzles are designed and all that, you can easily discover what you can do. I'll plod through that. So in summary, design is important to everyone. You are all designers. You create things, even if they're not physical products or UXs. You design processes, you design documents. So it's important to you for usability and security and safety. And human error is just bad design, or usually bad design. And here are the six things I went through. So you got visibility. You should be able to see what you can do. Feedback, tell the users what has happened, what's happening. Constraints, what can be done. Yeah. So the undo and redo buttons, that one. Mapping controls to what they do. Consistency is reusing what people already know. Do things the same way each time so people don't go, oh, I expected it to do this because it did it that way when I used it last. And affordance, how they know how to interact with your thing. And lastly, something I didn't mention, but test your designs. You do a lot of code testing and all that, but get your thing, put it in front of someone who's never seen it before, get them to use it. See what problems they have. Do they know how to use it? Do they have to like read a novel to figure out how to use it? Yeah, so that was really quick, but I've got some more things here. This book, the top one, The Design of Everyday Things, it's fantastic. It's really easy to read. It's not that long. It's recommended in a lot of companies and universities and things. That's where a lot of these design principles came from. The second link, I'll put these slides up linked in my Twitter actually, so you can get them there and I'll put them up in the internet and stuff. But I found that Medium link this morning and it's got a really good list of books and things to read. If you're into podcasts, 99% Invisible, by Roman Mars. It's fantastic. It's really easy to digest, like 15 minutes weekly, and he goes into like the design elements of things you like might not even think of. He'll just go into something that you think is like completely boring, and just turns out it's fascinating. It's great. And again, Don Norman and Roman Mars with Vox Media did this little 5-minute video on bad doors, and yeah, some error message things if you're interested in error messages. And again, these slides, I'll just go to the next one. Yeah, they're on, I posted them on Twitter, so you can like go through and click links and you don't have to type them out. It's more convenient. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charelle. Questions? I'll go you, Guy, first.
Cool, thanks for that. You actually mentioned one of my less favourite bits of user interface design, which is the greyed out menu bars, because it's impossible to find out why those things are greyed out. Do you have any ideas on what we can do for when you want to tell someone that they can't use something, but then communicate why?
Yeah, okay. So I guess it really depends on the individual like scenario for each thing, right? So you could do like hover text and things like that, or if it's really, you want to make it really obvious, I guess, as if possible. Have it nearby, have it, don't have it so far removed, make it clear. Again, I think it depends on what the reason is, but I don't think I can give a general enough answer saying do this. So, sorry. But that's a good point, yeah.
So this is something that I've been wanting to know for ages, actually. From a design perspective, and with the benefit of hindsight, what was wrong with Clippy? Like, like it's, from my perspective, it annoyed me too, but it seemed like a good idea to me, but it annoyed me, and I always wondered how they messed that up.
I think in that case, like you said, you were annoyed by it, so people see it as getting in the way. And again, if they see it as getting in the way, people will just want to disable it. So in theory, you should be able to communicate all that. Instead of saying, here's a paragraph of text to explain it, you should be able to communicate that in other ways in your design. Yeah, so I think.
Any more questions? Russell?
One of the patterns, one of the errors, bad error messages you showed was the error 35 type thing. In enterprise systems, it's really common to have that error 35 and then an error message, and the error 35 then becomes a handy key to look up in the documentation somewhere. So, is it just the fact of just error 35, or is it should you be avoiding that sort of non-human terminology completely?
So it's not I think the error code itself. It's just more of that's not useful on its own. Again, you need the say go to the documentation or whatever where error 35 is explained, or if like why not explain it right there where the error comes up if it's not too long, or just say hey try this, or if you want more information go to the docs. But yeah, you're right. Error codes are useful. It's just as a user for something, just seeing that code come up, and then you have to go somewhere else, and then you're just trying to switch over and over. So I don't think error codes are necessarily bad. It's just more that having it by itself isn't very useful. Isn't as useful as it could be. Yeah. Thanks.
Any more questions? There's two.
Thanks again. I agree with you that the design of a game like Portal is excellent for teaching how to use it simply by presenting an environment that affords you to learn how to use it. That implies, though, that the programs that we're designing would have to keep on changing the interface depending on what the user was up to and what their level of skill was. Portal is a fairly linear story going straight through, and we know that right at the start they have to learn how to do things. Are we suggesting? I'm trying to map that onto an example of a program which is where a user is trying to actually get a task done, and we don't know what that task is yet when they open the program.
Okay. So I think again it's one of those situations. dependent ones. But if you're going into a program for the first time, you want to be able to figure out how to do your task without having to go off and read a bunch of documentation. So the design element should make it such that you can kind of intuitively figure that out in the same way that the portal tutorial, you can kind of figure out what you need to do. But as an experienced user coming back to the software, it shouldn't be as intrusive as, say, like Clippy or something coming up and tell you every time. So I guess the advice there, and again, I know this is like not that useful and kind of nebulous, but make it kind of discreet but there, so that people can use it and take advantage of it, but not know it's there. Ideally, you want to not know that you're being kind of manipulated to do the right thing, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that helps, sorry.
I've got a question in relation to using feedback as acknowledgement. I just want to know if there's like a golden point where it's just the right amount of feedback, and I say that with a particular example in mind. I remember buying insurance for my car a few years back. I won't mention the company, but their theme is black and white, and they advertise it on television a lot. And I remember filling out this form, right, and every field I filled in, it had something like, it tried to encourage you, like, way to go, you're nearly there. Every single piece of it, like I gave the street number, good on you, way to go. Then I gave my street name, and it really pissed me off. So is there like a golden point where it's just the right amount of feedback?
I think that's a good case for user testing, right? So you should put that site in front of a person and say, hey, use this. And if they say, these things are kind of annoying, then you kind of have a clue. But obviously don't test it just on one person, test it on a few. And if the trend is, yeah, these are kind of annoying, then you'd remove it, I think. So yeah, that's a case for testing and trying to figure out the golden point for each specific use case.
Any more questions? We've got time for one more.
Can you think of any examples or instances like where you would blame the user? Like, is there a so you've designed an interface and you've user tested it and you're reasonably happy that it works well, it has good affordance and so on. Is there a point where you reach like a point of diminishing returns in terms of the effort that you put into the design, and how do you know where that line is?
I mean, yeah, you'll always have someone that tries to, put the square peg in the round hole or whatever. No matter how obvious you make it and put arrows, someone will try it. I guess the whole point of this is trying to mitigate a lot of problems. So less frustration. You can't eliminate it completely because you'll always have, grandma going, I don't know how to use this mouse or whatever. So you just want to capture as much as possible without making it obnoxious. I guess it's one of those, again, testing right balance and what you think. Just, I guess, the warning would be not get into the mindset of, I know this, therefore that's the baseline. Just go for your average user and say, is this usable to them? And of course, you're going to get the people who, can't. But that's one of the unavoidable things. I guess maybe in an ideal world, you could design it really, really well, and that would be awesome. Do that. Yeah. Oh, thank you.